HGC, I don't have anything against Pro Tools. I just hate when people try to still call it the industry standard. Let's put it this way. When I did the track On My Own with Sammy Adams, I did an initial mix, but we sent it off to another engineer. And that engineer used Pro Tools. Me and Gyrofunk did the beat in Ableton. This is just one example of hundreds of examples of tracks I've done. The engineer said, hey, can you send stems? So what I did was I bounced the stems and sent it to the engineer so he could mix it in Pro Tools. No big deal. This is in response to Pro Tools being the industry standard. Is it the industry standard when it comes to being in most studios, professional facilities? Yes. It is. Does that mean that you need to use Pro Tools and you need to learn Pro Tools? No, not necessarily. I think Pro Tools is a powerful tool. Is it the industry standard in studios? Yes, sure. But that means nothing to a producer. Almost nothing. If your goal is to engineer a bunch of big sessions, well, yeah, you should know Pro Tools because Pro Tools is in every major facility pretty much. But does that mean you should learn how to make beats in Pro Tools? Nah. You can make beats in Ableton, FL. When it comes to beats, Ableton and FL are pretty much the most popular DAWs. Does that mean you can't make a beat in Reason? Hell no, you can make a beat in Reason. Does that mean you can't use Logic? Why not? Why can't you use Logic? Industry standard is a pretty much nonsense topic, nonsense idea. Just because Pro Tools is in every major facility, I think that's why people call it the industry standard. In that sense, they'd be right. If your goal is to engineer sessions at big studios, then yeah, you should probably learn Pro Tools. If your goal is to be an engineer working at a big facility, then you should learn Pro Tools. I don't think it's a bad idea to learn Pro Tools because it's actually a really good DAW, and I don't think it's going anywhere as far as being the industry standard in that sense. But it doesn't matter. You can record in Ableton, you can record in FL, you can record on your OP1, you can do whatever. Let's talk about this for a minute. Industry standard, let's look at those words. Thank you for bringing it up, HGC. Industry standard means absolutely nothing. If it means anything at all, it means that most are using it. Just because Pro Tools is the industry standard when it comes to being at big facilities and being at big studios, it doesn't mean it sounds any better. It doesn't mean it does anything any better necessarily. Now, because I've used Pro Tools, I happen to know and I happen to believe that the way that it's set up for audio editing is superior to something like Ableton. It's superior definitely to something like FL Studio. Editing audio in Pro Tools, in my opinion, is probably the best. I've used Studio One, so I know a lot of people will say, well, Studio One is better, this and that. Studio One is cool too. I think Studio One has its pros. But in my opinion, Pro Tools is the strongest audio editing DAW. Now, Studio One is a more all-in-one solution. Studio One, I would rather produce a song in Studio One than Pro Tools, but Pro Tools is the king when it comes to audio editing. It beats Ableton, of course it beats FL. I think a lot of inspiration in Ableton came from Pro Tools as far as audio editing. Because me being an expert in Ableton, when I switched over to learning Pro Tools for editing, I noticed that a lot of the stuff was the same. So I think that the Ableton developers took a lot of influence in the early days from Pro Tools. Back to my point, industry standard means nothing. If you're happy producing in Ableton, if you're happy producing in Studio One, if you're happy producing in FL Studio, there's absolutely no reason to feel like you're inferior because those aren't the industry standard in some big studio. Who the f cares? It doesn't matter what the industry standard is. The key that I want to leave you with, being in the game for 20 years, 20 plus years, all that matters is that you make good music. Make good music. I don't give a shit if you make the whole beat on the OP1. I don't care if you make the beat on TikTok. I don't care if you use MTV Music Generator. Make good music, and it doesn't matter what you use. Guess what? I've tested Ableton. I've tested FL Studio. I've tested Pro Tools. They all sound the same. There's no difference. Maybe FL Studio has a different sounding plugin for sure. The plugins in each DAW sound different, but working in Pro Tools, doing your vocals in Pro Tools, I've heard even really dope engineers say it sounds better. Guess what? It doesn't. Audio going into Pro Tools that you record does not sound better than audio going into FL or Ableton. The plugins sound different. I know the pan laws are different when you adjust panning. When you touch a fader, it's going to be different. But by default, the stock DAW, the ones and zeros, when you drag an audio file into Ableton, drag an audio file into Pro Tools, record an audio file in Ableton, record an audio file in Pro Tools on the same settings, that is the same audio. As long as you're not doing anything to affect it, no panning, no EQ, none of that, it's the same audio. Then it's just about the plugins. I hope that answers the industry standard idea. HGC, absolutely right. The only thing that industry standard means that's useful is that it's in most places and it's being used in most places. Doesn't mean